So welcome to the Market Creating Innovation Bootcamp Q&A. My name is Kevin O'Connor from the Legatum Center for Development and Entrepreneurship at MIT. I'm joined here by Afosa Ojoma. He's a senior research fellow at the Clayton Christensen Institute, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank dedicated to improving the world through disruptive innovation. He's also the co-author of the book, The Prosperity Paradox, and the driving force behind these market creating innovation bootcamps. So just briefly, a little bit about the Legatum Center. The Legatum Center at MIT is a global community of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial leaders who believe innovative market-driven solutions are the key to driving social and economic progress. And together we support entrepreneurship and innovation as a means to build thriving ecosystems, transform markets, and drive inclusive prosperity worldwide. We do this through a variety of ways, such as educational programs like the Legatum Fellowship, which brings together a cohort of MIT entrepreneurs and equips them with the practical skills and knowledge needed to build scalable businesses that drive change. We connect and convene a global community of entrepreneurial ecosystem stakeholders to engage and reflect on their role in creating value and building lasting prosperity. And finally, we collaborate in meaningful ways with diverse communities to help strengthen economic development, such as our collaboration with the Clayton Christensen Institute in helping to develop the Market Creating Innovation Bootcamps. So these bootcamps are particularly important to us at the Legatum Center because we do believe they provide an entrepreneurial solution, the skills, and the mindset to address issues such as accessibility and affordability. And lastly, I'd like to send out a special thank you to the MasterCard Foundation for their generous support in making this program a reality. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. We've kind of all compiled your questions from registration, and thank you very much for providing that feedback. Afosa and I are going to address those questions in kind of a Q&A style chat. And a little bit later on, Tina from the Clay Christensen Institute will jump on, and the three of us will address any questions that you have in particular, any questions we might have missed. So I encourage you to continue using the chat function, which seems like it's pretty active right now. Talk amongst yourselves and talk to us, but any questions that you have in particular, put them into the Q&A box, just so that we can sort them out. So unless there's anything else, we can get started. Great. So Afosa, can you give us kind of an overview of the Market Creating Innovation Bootcamp program? How should potential applicants kind of envision the program, its many facets? How will this be rolled out? And kind of what are the long-term plans for the program?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate this from all over the world, especially those who are up early. Thank you. A little bit of explanation on the impetus behind this project. Many of you here know that a little over a year ago, Professor Christensen and I and Karen Dillon published The Prosperity Paradox. And in it, we talked about this idea of market creating innovations and how powerful they are for helping not just organizations grow, but also countries sort of get a grasp at prosperity. Well, after the book came out and we're traveling and speaking about the ideas, the overwhelming feedback that I got was, okay, what do I do? Where do I go? What do I do next? How do I sort of take these ideas and frameworks and put them into practice? And that was a question that, in all honesty, I didn't have an answer to, or at least a direct answer. As Kevin mentioned, the Christensen Institute is primarily a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank. And so our currency really is ideas, right? We focus on innovation focused ideas that are grounded in a lot of Clay Christensen's innovation theories, and we write about them, we speak about them. And so this was sort of a question that didn't quite have an answer to. But then in conversation with some of the members of my team, conversation with some of the folks at MIT, especially Dina Sharif, who's the executive director at the Legatum Center, we thought, let's take some of these ideas, some of the theories, and create a boot camp, which is essentially what we've done. But we also recognize that the boot camp by itself, offering that is not enough. So I'll just share with you sort of our long-term vision for the boot camp, how we plan to roll it out, and some of the other components in it. And so if you sort of think about what we're trying to do here using this framework, we have a lot of entrepreneurs and really intrapreneurs, right? People working within organizations. And our hope and idea is we will be able to offer this boot camp to as many people as possible who are interested. And this is really going to take care of the knowledge and insights component of this system that we want to build, right? Now, after that, we would love to take the people who have now gone through the boot camp, put them in a community, right? So connect them to other people who have gone through the boot camp, seasoned entrepreneurs and investors who are able to provide coaching, who are able to provide some kind of expertise to these people who have gone through the boot camp, all with the focus of developing market creating innovations. Yeah. And then once sort of they go through this program, we are at the moment compiling a list of investors who are focused on really investing in emerging markets. Our focus is on Africa for now, and I'll explain here why that is. So right now we're compiling a list of investors focused on Africa, and so if you have investors that you know, please send them our way. And then the hope is once we get a list of investors, we explain to them what we're trying to do, and we can begin to send information from these entrepreneurs who have gone through the boot camp to the investors, right? We send pitches, we send their ideas, we make these connections so that we can get sort of a more well-oiled machine. And then on the back end of this, we're a think tank, right? So we want to learn what's working, what's not, right? Are investors excited about these entrepreneurs, these ideas, these pitches they're seeing? Are they investing? Is the community working? What do we need to do to make this community of potential market creating innovators more vibrant? We've designed several coaching sessions. Are they actually working? Are they not? How do we improve that? So we have that data and research that we feed back into the program. And we are going to write about this, publish papers and articles about how this is working, with the hope that the output, right, our output is really a slew of market creating innovators coming out on the other end, right? Now we're at the beginning stages of building this ecosystem, if you will. And so we would ask for patience as we build this. We would love feedback and thoughts on how we might make sure this works for everybody. Like I said, we would like if you have ideas of investors who might be interested in this or seasoned entrepreneurs, let us know. Now, in terms of, okay, what happens tomorrow? How are we rolling this out? We, as Kevin mentioned, we got a generous grant from the MasterCard Foundation, and that has enabled us to develop the curriculum for the boot camp. So we have that at the moment. And the curriculum is really anchored in the case method. And so it's going to be active learning. And you're going to be introduced to several innovation theories. And so we're excited about that. We're going to launch in 7 countries where MasterCard has a presence. And so Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, and Uganda. So that's Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, and Uganda. Now we're launching there largely because MasterCard has funded this, and they funded it to support a launch in those 7 countries. In terms of when this is going to be rolling out, we're currently working with MasterCard as they are having conversations with their country offices in these countries. And we're looking at Q2, probably towards the end of Q2, we're really going to start rolling these out. So I would say around June-ish, we're going to start rolling these out. Kevin, you asked about 5 questions in that one question. So that's that's a lot of questions. So I'm hoping I did all of them justice. Now I don't know if I did, but
you did.
All right.
All right. So kind of given this overview of the program, my next question, I promise this will only be one, not 5. Who are these market creating innovation boot camps for, and kind of what type of entrepreneurs are you looking for?
All right. Now, this is something I would say I struggle with I want this to be for everybody, right? But it's a marathon. But so we're starting with entrepreneurs who sort of fit this profile, if you will. Now, it doesn't mean you have to check a box on every single thing, but in terms of a guidepost and a guideline, we're looking for entrepreneurs who, you want to solve a problem that affects a majority of people in a region, right? So not just a solution for the top 5% of people in your country or the continent. Scalable across regions. I believe that, over the next several decades, we will see a lot of innovations from emerging economies coming back to, I would say, wealthier economies. So scalable across regions. Obviously we want to see innovations that create jobs, direct and indirect jobs. So, one of the ways you create indirect jobs is by accelerating commerce in a region, right? So does your innovation enable somebody to be more productive in what they're doing? And so that's one. If you've read The Prosperity Paradox, you would know that market creating innovations are more than a product or a service. They're really a system because to solve one simple problem, you often have to create the underlying business infrastructure, if you will, that enables you provide a product or a service to many people and simplify it. So we're looking for ideas that are really, when the entrepreneur is talking about a system and how, I really need to focus on a system, that's the kind of thing we're looking at. And enabled by radical technology, right? So the focus on the radical technology is simply it enables scale, right? And so these are the kinds of things we're looking at. It's not, like I said, it's not like, oh, I gotta have a checkbox on every single thing. That's not the focus. But as a guide, we're hoping that the entrepreneurs are thinking in this way.
That's helpful. So given these kind of requirements, if I'm looking to partake in participate in the boot camps themselves, do I have to be working in kind of a specific sector or an industry or vertical to be able to apply?
Yeah, no. So it's sector or industry agnostic. I think the principles and the concepts apply. One of the things that our dearly beloved professor used to say is a good theory cuts across industries, cuts across sectors, and so when you the idea behind market creating innovations is it's sector agnostic. And part of why we're also doing it that way is I think there's a lot to be gained when you're in a room, virtual or physical, with people in and from other sectors. I think you can learn a lot from them. So if we think about Henry Ford, for instance, you know, the idea of the famous assembly line didn't come from him looking at how cars were built. It actually came from the meatpacking industry and how they had figured out a pretty efficient way to make and process meat in bulk. And so he saw that and was like, well, can I apply that to cars? And so I think there's a lot to be gained from having folks different sectors. Now, over time, are we going to find that, yeah, maybe we do need, you know, everybody focused on financial services in one room or healthcare? I don't know the answer to that, and we're sort of approaching this with a level of humility that we're going to learn, right? So that if you remember the framework I shared, you know, the data and the research we gather will help us improve the future iterations of this offering.
So it sounds like it's an iterative process over and over and over again. Okay, so another big question, do I need to have kind of an established business or experience as an entrepreneur to take part in the program?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you know, you need the interest, right? And the passion and the belief that innovation and entrepreneurship can have significant impact. So no, you don't need to have a business already or an established company or so on. So, yeah.
Great. And then keeping in this topic of eligibility, will the program itself be open to those who aren't entrepreneurs, say investors, partners, other ecosystem stakeholders?
So short answer is yes, but with the mindset that we have designed this with one person in mind or one persona in mind, and that is an entrepreneur who is trying to solve a problem. You know, when you think about perhaps three main stakeholders in economic development or innovation and entrepreneurship, you know, you've got an entrepreneur, you've got an investor, you've got a policymaker. The entrepreneur wakes up every day and is troubled by problems, and they are trying to figure out how to get the resources they need, develop the processes which live inside an organization, right, that they build, often called a startup, to solve these problems that they wake up every day and they just can't stop thinking about. So that's one. That's who we designed this for, with that in mind. The investor, they wake up every day thinking, how and where can I find those entrepreneurs? How can I better vet those entrepreneurs? How do I get other investors to invest in the entrepreneurs I believe in, right? So they have a different, what we call, job to be done. And then the policymakers, the good ones, are waking up, hopefully thinking, how do I create an environment where the entrepreneur and the investor are welcome, where they can thrive and they can develop, hopefully, more market creating innovations. Now, the reason I explain that is we focused the job to be done, if you will, of this system is really focused on the entrepreneur. So if an investor wants to be a part of this, he or she has to come in with the understanding that this is designed for the entrepreneur. Now we have that purple box for that capital where we are, like I said, getting a database of investors because they are critical to this system. But we are most likely not going to be able to answer their question of, how do I vet these guys? How do, we have not designed that for this. Now, again, will we over time build a, market creating innovation investors edition? I don't know. That's where the data and research, right, will help us figure that out. But it's a long way of saying we will not close this to anyone who feels they will get value from this. However, it's important that they understand we designed this to prioritize the needs of the entrepreneur.
Thank you. So I wanted to dive into questions around the program details themselves. And you said this twice and you were pretty clear, but I want you to say it one more time. So what locations are the boot camps going to be held in?
Yeah. So they will launch in Ghana. So before I even say the countries, we were able to design this, right, through a generous donation from the MasterCard Foundation, right? And with that, there are stipulations on where we sort of kick this off at, right? And as part of that, we have to kick this off in 7 countries. Ghana, Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, Uganda. So we're gonna host these boot camps in those countries, starting out, and then my hope is that we will add more countries as we find new partners. So, yeah.
So another big question is that if I'm not from a particular location where a boot camp's being held, can I still attend that boot camp or a particular boot camp?
Yeah. So eventually, so I would say if your organization, the idea you're working on, or your company is focused in any of those countries. I mean, you don't have to be physically located in those countries, but what you're working on has to be in those countries, right? So I think that's an important distinction. With what we've seen over the last year with the pandemic, I mean, I think it's geographic location is less the issue. It's more where's the impact your companies is having. So, yeah.
And then if a boot camp isn't being offered in my region, can I expect one to be kind of held in the future? And more importantly, how do I get notified about it if it is getting launched in the future?
Yeah. So Kevin, that's your job. Why are you asking me a question? That's your, I'm joking, but I think if it's not offered, please reach out to us. If you're able to galvanize enough interest where you are, and have enough emails coming out to us, or just enough like interest, what we want to do is go back to our funders and say, hey, we're only able to do this in these 7 countries. We're only able to do, 7 boot camps. We need to 10x this, right? So please let us know if your country wasn't mentioned, and we're going to work at doing it. If you want to expedite that process, and you have the bandwidth and the capabilities, then you can talk to people in your country, like corporations, foundations, and say, hey, I'd love to bring this to my country, Gambia, Botswana, for South Africa, wherever. And then we can figure out sort of the cost implications of that. so that we can now offer this in your country.
Great. And then kind of on this topic of kind of timeline and regions, when should we expect the next boot camp to kind of be held, and when can applicants apply?
So I actually have a meeting with MasterCard Foundation tomorrow to begin to get a sense for where we're going to kick this off and when. We're liaising with them and the country offices. And so my best guess would be Q2. So towards the end of June. And if that's when we would host the first one, then applications will probably open around May, mid to end May. Take a couple weeks to process them, and then so towards the end of June is what I'm thinking. And I think once we get the first one, if you've ever created anything, you know, sort of starting and just getting the system up and running is often the most difficult part. And that's really the phase where we are right now. And because this is a system with multiple moving parts and pieces, there's a lot of coordination that has to happen, right? Designing the coaching sessions, making sure we build predictability into it. And so our long-term vision is, consider this, our long-term vision is every week, for instance, the average entrepreneur, again, starting out in Africa, if they need coaching on something, there's a website they can go, sign up for a session, and there'll be a session hosted, every week on a particular day, a particular time, right? That's a long-term vision. In the world of innovation and entrepreneurship, there's a lot of unpredictability. There's just a lot of ups and downs. And as best as we can, we wanna help systematize that and build some kind of predictability into it as best as we can in places where we can help, right? So, yeah.
Thank you. So my next question, it's the big question, I'm sure, for many. What does it cost me to participate?
$25 million.
Okay, well, what does it cost everyone else? So I know you charge more from me, so.
Yeah, that was Kevin. You $25 million. So yeah, this is not for you. I'm kidding. My hope is it costs you, your sweat and your time. Right now, in those countries I mentioned, if you are selected, it will cost you nothing. Or really, it will cost you time. We've designed this such that it's active learning, so it's not going to be me or some facilitator preaching for an hour or 2 hours for each session, right? It's going to be a very dynamic session. It's going to be case study based. And so if you are not there or you are not participating, we're not really learning. And so it will cost you time. Look, the average entrepreneur struggles enough, and the expectation that they will have to pay for this is a difficult one. And so my hope is we can design this thing such that every entrepreneur who comes through this does not have to pay out of pocket for this, which means we will need more partners like MasterCard and other organizations and foundations who can sponsor these entrepreneurs. But the first cohort in those 7 countries, it's going to be free, financially speaking, and then in subsequent cohorts, our hope is we do find funders who will see the value in what we're trying to build and invest in this ecosystem and say, yeah, I'll fund another 10,000 entrepreneurs going through this next year. with the understanding that it's not just you come 1 week, you're out. We really want to create a system here. I can't say that enough, right? Because I've studied innovation enough to know entrepreneurs don't need just another boot camp or another 2 hours in a classroom. They need a system. And that's what we're trying to build here. We're not there yet, but hopefully we'll get there and create the kind of resources that support entrepreneurs.
Thank you. So thinking about the actual boot camp content, as a potential applicant, I'm curious what I should expect. Could you give us kind of an overview of what the program might look like, what the experience would be, as well as the kind of duration in the commitment that you would like to see?
Yeah. So as a team, we actually had a debate on what to call this, boot camp, workshop, course. And if you think of what a boot camp is, right, militarily at least, it's a pretty intense. And so we've designed something that will be an intensive sort of 2 to 3 day boot camp. You'll go through different sessions. There are 8 sessions in total. And each session is designed to change the way you think about innovation and entrepreneurship, and to introduce you to innovation theories that, again, our dearly beloved professor developed through the course of his career. And to give you an idea of the impact this could have, you think about Amazon, Apple, Dropbox. Some of you use Dropbox. I'm drawing a blank now. Netflix. These are just a sampling of some of the companies that have been influenced by Professor Christensen's theories and ideas, right? And so we are bringing those theories and applying them to the context in which many, I would say we're starting out, emerging market entrepreneurs find themselves. And so it'd be 8 sessions. Each session will introduce you to a theory, sort of change the way you think. And then after the session, we give you a worksheet that has questions and primers that you can then apply, right, to your idea, to your business, to your circumstance, and to make it quite relevant. And so 2 to 3 days, 8 sessions. Each session lasts about 90 minutes to 2 hours. In the sessions, right, before the sessions, you've read a case study, you've read a short innovation sort of theory article, and then you come to the session, and then we have a robust discussion. And then after the robust discussion, the facilitator will sort of summarize and present some of the frameworks, in the last maybe 30 or so minutes. And then we'll just do some takeaways. And then post-session, you'll have these worksheets. So that hopefully gives you an idea of what we're hoping that looks like.
Great. So, and you touched on this a little bit, but I just want to, for clarification purposes, are there case studies and kind of practical examples embedded into each one of these modules for the bootcamp?
Yes, yes, and that part of the boot camp is going to be something that's living. All right, we're going to be trying to change some of the case studies we use, but yes, they're going to be relevant case studies that put yourself in the shoes of an entrepreneur who's trying to solve a problem, and then you come to the class, if you will, and you talk about it, right? So why would you make that decision? Is this a good decision or not? How would you go about it? Why? And the idea behind this is to divorce you as much as possible from just making decisions based on your opinion, and really grounding some of these decisions on tried and true innovation theories. That way you make fewer mistakes, you make better decisions, and ultimately you increase your chance or your odds of success.
Excellent. So another big question, if I participate in the Market Creating Innovation boot camps, will it enable me to build market creating innovations?
That's the hope. that's the hope. So, you know, market creating innovations are very difficult to build. And, you know, I think this is the critical missing piece in the sort of prosperity puzzle for many emerging economies. And you see why, right? They're really difficult to build. And so we'll give some tools and frameworks. And then that's why we're really working hard to build these other components, because just knowing how to do something is very different from being equipped with the necessary resources to help you do the thing. And so we're working hard to build these other components so that if you are serious about this, you'll have some support from these other boxes, if you will. So.
And then do you envision the boot camp to be done virtually?
Yeah, when we started building this, we were building something for a very much in-person experience. I mean, if you've ever been in a case discussion, it's like lively, vibrant, it's exciting. But then, you know, we all know COVID had other plans. So yes, we have pivoted and we have built something that will have a very, I think, exciting, vibrant virtual like experience. We've piloted several sessions and they've gone really well, and they've all lasted longer than the allotted time, which in the virtual world, to me, that's a plus. If people are willing to stay on longer, looking at a screen and engaging in discourse. So the short answer is yes, we have designed it to be virtual. My hope is that once the world begins to open up, we can make this an in-person experience to really foster that community, right? Better foster that community. So.
And while the boot camps are kind of being done virtually, you know, what if someone has a poor or unstable internet connection?
Yeah. So, you know, there are some questions we can. There are some problems, I suppose, that there's not a whole lot we can do about. I mean, if it's virtual and the internet's not stable, if my internet goes out, I mean, it is, yeah, that's gonna be a problem, right? It's one of the risks. In one of the sessions we did virtually, that happened, and that did delay things, and you know, people had to get back on. Can you hear me? Can you not? It's the nature of the virtual beast, if you will. So there's not a whole lot we can do about that. I will say, in working with, you know, MasterCard partners on the ground, we hope that we will find locations, partners on the ground who will be willing to host, and that will or should mitigate whatever internet issues, right, we might have, as opposed to having people from like all over with varying degrees of internet accessibilities.
Right. And then my last kind of question on programming, what types of mentorship and networking opportunities would be available to those who are participating?
Yes. So now there are two boxes there that I think I should just explain in a little bit more detail. So for the community, our idea is to put every cohort that goes through this into a group And so that will build some level of intimacy amongst the people who go through this together. And then everybody who goes through the MCI boot camp will be put in sort of a much bigger network. And so think maybe a closed LinkedIn group or something where people can begin to share, job opportunities, look for co-founders and so on, right? So that would be the bigger group. The smaller group will probably be, a WhatsApp group, something that's more manageable. So we want to foster community that way. And then coaching, we are working right now to develop a set of predictable coaching sessions. It would probably be every Tuesday or Wednesday, call it noon West African time. So those details we're trying to work out. But the idea is once you're done with this, you would be able to sign up for a coaching session. We're going to start about 20 to 25 people to a coach. And the coach would go through a struggle or a question, right? So how do I find talent? How do I raise money? How do I scale my business? How do I manage growth? So we've identified about 11 coaching topics. But again, the most important lines and boxes here, the data and research, right? It might be that we might need to make some, create new coaching sessions based off of feedback. But once you're through with the boot camp, you'd be able to sign up for these coaching sessions that you think are relevant for you to sort of help you make the next step. And then in terms of mentorship and one-on-one coaching, we don't have the resources for that yet. But again, if you think of this as the beginning, if it turns out that that's where we need to go, that's where the research suggests that this would be a lot more impactful if you actually had people one-on-one, then we'll take that to, we'll write about it, take that to, potential funders and say, hey, what do you think about beefing this up? So.
Which is a great segue into my kind of final question is, what are the opportunities for kind of collaboration and partnerships with, academics and entrepreneurial support organizations?
Yeah. They're big. I mean, so this is something we want to, we want to create, but I wouldn't say own, if you will. We want to partner with organizations so that this can scale. Next year, if I'm still, me and maybe a couple of people on my team are the only ones doing these boot camps, that would be a failure on my part, right? My hope is we can partner with other organizations that have the capacity, share the vision, train facilitators, like here's how you would facilitate these sessions so that we can really scale this. We got to figure out the details on how we develop those partnerships, but in terms of executing on this, that is a big goal. With regard to the other aspect, there are many questions, right? Research questions that we would love to tackle as we run these, right? Because again, if you've read The Prosperity Paradox, you'll know, the organization, nonprofit I founded, we built wells and they didn't work after a while, and then we had to stop building wells. And so in some ways, we want to make sure this works. We have a very specific input. We have a very specific output that we hope comes out on the other end. here's a system. Our hypothesis is this system will help us get there. If this doesn't work, then we have to figure out what's going on here. And to do that, we're going to have to do research on this. So we're going to gather a lot of data on the types of entrepreneurs applying, the types of entrepreneurs going through the program, types of investors that make investments. What are we learning? What kind of coaching are we doing? Is that helpful? Is it not? Are people engaged in the community? There's going to be a lot of data we're getting from this. So if you're an academic organization and you'd love to come and do some research here, by all means, we want to collaborate with folks, make some of this data available so that we can learn to improve, innovation and entrepreneurship across the world.
That's great. Thank you, Afosa.
You're welcome.
So I thought that we would kind of open it up to questions that the participants might have.
Afosa, can you talk about what can people in the U.S. do to support the program, or people who perhaps aren't living in the countries, working in the countries?
I mean, a lot, right? If I categorize what people in the U.S. can do, I would sort of put them in maybe 3 buckets, right? We have a lot of money in America. We have a lot of access to money, foundations, organizations, and so if you believe in the idea of this, I think there's a way you can talk about this and help us democratize access to this. That's one. The second thing is it's more about it's less to do with the finances, more to do with the awareness. And so really talking about programs like this. And so if you have access to channels where we can write about this and talk about this, whether it's the press or a popular blog or something, I think that would be huge. And then I suppose the third thing is the facilitation one. We do want to scale this. And so I don't know the answer to this, but the question is, how can we best scale this system that you're looking at, right? Or certain components of this. If you have expertise in any of this that you're looking at, if you have access to investors who would want to, a database, like whatever. Yeah, that scaling piece is a question that we're gonna wrestle with. We're not yet wrestling with it because we're really getting the system off the ground. But any of those 3 ways would be absolutely helpful. And I suppose one last one is, we talk about emerging markets as if emerging markets don't exist in the US a lot. There are parts of the US and other, I would say, wealthy countries where this will be very relevant, right? And so if you have access to those parts of the US and you'd like to see this happen there, there's also an opportunity for that.
Okay, great. Kevin, maybe you can speak to this one. Can you share some details about the certification?
I know that there's a certification kind of involved, but I still think that we're kind of working out the details as to what that looks like, and we should have more information soon. Yeah.
And for now, it's really a certificate of attendance that says, look, you attended this boot camp, all the sessions and so on. So it wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, I graduated from MIT or I'm now, this, but it would be sort of another stamp of approval. Because again, as an entrepreneur, especially in emerging markets, any kind of resource, if you will, that you can use to increase or improve your credibility, it helps. And I think our idea behind this, giving you something, saying, hey, you were here, that's the focus of that. That's the reason we have that there. Yeah.
Okay. Afosa, you might have covered this, but I had some internet issues earlier in the meeting. There's a question about Is there a minimum amount of capital that investors must commit?
No. And in fact, investors don't, what we're doing is not so much investors will commit. We're really just getting investors together, and we're saying, hey, we're doing this. Are you open to receiving pitches from these folks that are going through this system? If the answer is yes, then after each cohort, a couple months after each cohort, when they've gone through some coaching and so on, we will have the entrepreneurs send us their pitches, and then we will send it to our database of investors who have said, yeah, we'd love to receive this. And so, you know, I will say as an investor, you don't have to commit anything, but again, because we're not doing this to just do it, I mean, we're all going to die someday, and we want to make sure the time we spend here is, you know, is useful. We will get data on, you know, are investors interested? Are they investing? We'd love to hear from you. Like, why aren't you investing? We've sent 10 pitches. What's wrong? Because we want to build that back into this so that it's a good use of your time. It's a good use of the entrepreneur's time. It's a good use of everybody's time. Because the one thing we can all agree on is there are enough problems in many parts of the world that innovation and entrepreneurship can solve. Let's build a system to help do that. So hope that helps.